Two. All right. So we're back. As soon as it cut off, you were saying that you don't believe humanity will ever be ready for disclosure. And I've got a point to make about that also, but I just want to know, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I just feel like people like who if there were sentient beings that have access to space travel, advanced space travel to our planet, it made contact with us, right? That humans, us as people, are not ready for that contact because we don't even know who they are and what their motives are and all these other things, right? That go with meeting if this for simplicity's sake, the first contact, right? In that contact for someone, from that point on, yeah, there would just be so many people that would just say it's the end of the world, and the world would just go crazy, chaotic, and it just go the whole world would go ballistic. I mean, I envision riots. I envision, you know, people just changing their whole lives, just going crazy, right? People like like take for example COVID, right, and what that did to people, right, to us as a society, right, and how that affected so many people, right, and it might not. It changed the way we are. It changed the way we viewed germs. Changed the way we viewed, um, China. Changed the way we viewed all our trust in government, um, federal estate, and the whole conspiracy word. COVID was alive, COVID was set up, and all this conspiracy that's around COVID.
But that's even a conspiracy. They've admitted that it was a lab leak now and that the vaccine wasn't really beneficial. It actually made it worse, really, overall. And all of what was a conspiracy about COVID has kind of been, revealed at this point.
Yeah, but again, like in the moment when that stuff happened, right? There was
Was
so much uncertainty.
hysterical, yes.
There was hysterical and people fighting over like toilet paper and all these other things, like, right, it stalled, supply line shortages and created this whole mass hysteria in general about COVID. Where you can, you walk into a grocery store without a mask on, people are now accusing you of you wanting to kill their grandmother, and because she's immunocompromised, right?
Good one.
All
Good
this.
one. Theo Vaughn said was during COVID, it felt like coughing was the new N word, where if you coughed in any open building, everyone would look at you, shut up.
Yeah, but again, like, I mean, I'm not gonna get into like COVID and all of that because we're gonna just steer way off course with that.
Sure.
But the point I'm trying to make is, look what COVID did for the society, and imagine that as alien contact, the world would just go nuts, right? It would be insane. It would just be debauchery on the highest level, and our trust of government will just, I mean, because obviously, most likely the government already knows about it, right? If anything,
And
right?
I agree that it could go bad, but I also think that a lot has been revealed already, and I think it could be done like how the CIA admitted and revealed that they were purposely selling crack in the inner city and targeting lower income neighborhoods and stifling black progress, I believe is what I think it was Nixon said was the goal. So I think, we've revealed that that's been disclosed, and it was done shadily because it was done during a lot of other crazy events and COVID, but at the same time nothing came of it. People read it and were like, all right, well, I still have work in the morning. Like, I think it could be similar if done correctly. Like, okay, well, there's the aliens, but I still have to pay my bills, and the aliens aren't helping me or fucking with me to any extent at this point. So why should I care? Like, yeah, cool.
I mean, that's how, maybe majority, maybe I'd say 40% of people might handle it, but that other 20, 20, 20. the compromise of 60 might not be able to handle it.
Maybe the like unemployed and fringe people might, but ultimately, yeah, people might have a little bit of an existential crisis and be like, okay, we're not alone. Like, all right, well then why the fuck am I still doing this bullshit all the time? But you have to because, you don't have any other way. Yeah, if the aliens exist, you find out about it and it shows you a way to where it makes sense to rationally change your life. Cool. But what's rioting gonna do? Like, all right, yeah, there's aliens. We're gonna riot and destroy the Capitol. For what? How is that going to help anything, you know?
I mean, I think we destroy capitals for less, in my opinion. But
I I would be willing to argue that could have also been set up. There was a lot of agents around and, like the bricks on the corners that people were leaving.
I mean,
Yeah.
well,
I'm just saying that I think it could be done right. But to get off of that a little bit, what do you think about like did you see David Grush's meeting with Congress and like maybe like anything he's been on? Because Grush had Grush was in like the top of the NRO. He wasn't like super anything. He didn't have crazy clearances that a lot of people don't have or anything, just a higher level clearance than, basic. And he he made a lot of very startling to some people claims about, potential like alien bodies and recovered UFOs, reverse engineered, interdimensional beings that like apparently parts of the government have been aware about and they accepted. And he also really like brought more light to the whole, I guess that'll be a different topic, but the psionics, government psionics, and actually like investing heavily and finding people to be like remote viewers and like hone their like astral projection and like, I guess, I don't know, sort of just like psychic powers.
so again, I don't think that when we get into this topic, everything just sounds harebrained. I think so. I forgot who said this. I got this from like there's an Instagram page called Doss's Discourse where he talks about just society. He mainly talks about society, but he says that I think one of the quotes the most like if you don't know how things operate, then everything's a conspiracy. And this just seems to this whole obsession with conspiracies and trying to pull points, right? It's going back to David Grush, right, when he said, um, again, when people talk about this, you're automatically excluded from good society in a sense. Um, to the point where, you know, he might have a point, right?
Yeah,
But society will not accept these claims without actual physical evidence, right? Of
a lot of other people have
experiments.
also came out, like Commander David Fravor, and I forget the other commander, but they were the USS Nimitz and like the fighter pilot for the Nimitz who saw things. They saw it in the like in front of them and on their radar. And the people on the ground, the commander from the ground who saw it on the radar, and it was like making turns that no craft we know about even has ever been able to make, and it was stopping fully and floating and then taking off immediately at like Mach speeds. And so it's like,
So yeah, so there are a lot of reports on that, and that I'm not going to. I can't say the validity of those things of those claims, but again, I do feel like yeah, there are a lot of unexplained phenomenon the U.S. military picks up, and yeah, that catches maybe some people's attention right on a higher level. But we generally like, especially in the military sense, like we always keep secrets from people from the down low, right? Like if you have access to that, you're not going to disclose that to anyone lower than you, right? You're going to speak into higher echelons of government, um, which that in terms of extraterrestrial and especially technology, that will be in the inner circles, the higher inner circles of government. that we have, and but I will say evidence that can these people in higher levels of government handle that type of information and do it correctly, right? Because time and time again, the government has been proven to be, especially when you're on the higher levels, incompetent. Um, incompetent. They misevaluate things. They tend to keep things because, for one, it gives them power, right? You know, having secrets and classified information and all this other stuff, right? You know, if you're on that level, right, you think you're like hot shit, right? Because you have this access to information and other people don't, right? And now you have the ability to claim that, right, and then have that be a responsibility, right? And when you're dealing with anything in the government, right, everything's like a like a gimme like your responsibilities, right? I want that responsibility, right? Oh, like I want to be in charge of, you know, the invasion of Iraq, right? I want to be in charge of the invasion of Afghanistan, all right? Because all I did all this and then I did all that, right? Like that's how it is, right? In the bureaucratic world. Um, and most of these people, right? Because really think about it, if you're really that smart, if you're really that capable, if you're really that intelligent, if you're really that competent, would you work for government? And the answer is no. Most likely, you will not spend that time. You will work. Most likely, people. And again, I always just say, follow the money, right? Would you rather work for a high-paying civilian job if you're that capable and competent, or would you work for the government, right? And unfortunately, people don't feel that call to service to stay with the government because, you know, once you know, especially in my level, right? People always ask, "Are you doing 20 years? Are you doing 20 years?" Meaning that, are you doing 20 years of government service to get that pension, right?
Right.
And the answer is, I mean, yeah, it's stable. Like you have it because it's paycheck on all like a good on all like good stuff, benefits, but all on the civilian side, everything's so competitive. Where yeah, like what is a pension? What is all this stuff, type of stuff? What is, you know, all this stability? I mean, I'm the best at what I do. Why would I work for the government, right? That's where you know, and when you get in the heads of these type of people, I don't think that if you were responsible for that, right, that power would not be handled responsibly. And the government has showed time and time again of misuse of, and even in recent memory, right? Take for example, the war in Iraq, right? You know, I mean that whole war was on the prompt and the lie that the weapons of mass destruction are was found, right? Or there's potential, you know, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and Saddam Hussein is going to use it,
Right.
right?
And so point
Based on,
all that.
and I actually, so when I worked at Stanford, which is funny because I'm wearing a Frost amphitheater shirt. Like, so I worked at Stanford for 4 years as a bartender, and I was working at the Hoover Institute too from time to time. And I ran into Condoleezza Rice a couple times. She was Secretary of State under George W. Bush in the second term, and she was actually in the war room when the towers hit. Right, she was actually in that bunker with George W. Bush, with all the top heads, right, discussing what they're gonna do, right, and sent with us in that some firefighter. George W. Bush was in that room. I'm sorry, but it was Dick Cheney, right? To send fighter pilots to try and take out that plane, right? That was going to head to. I believe that plane was heading toward the the Washington D.C., but it got the passengers took over and it crashed in like Pennsylvania or something like that. Yeah, so she did talk and was discussing on the possibility of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and she said that, well, satellite images, we had actual satellite images of chlorine, of tanks of chlorine, because when we announced the war in Iraq, we weren't there immediately, right? We were there like 3 4 months after the fact, right? They had that intel, right, of chlorine trucks, or trucks full of chlorine in a convoy, right? Satellite imaging of it. And by the time we went to Iraq, Saddam most likely disposed of it, right? So, but that justified the whole war, right? And I mean, again, look at the whole war and the whole global war on terror. And I'm not discrediting any of the veterans that fought in that war, any of the Americans' lives that were lost. Unfortunately, though, the bureaucratic powers that be made that mission a mission failure to bring stability to the Middle East, right? Which, if you're trying to say, hey, we're trying to topple a dictatorship, which is Saddam Hussein, and institute democracy, well, that democracy, I mean, I was in Iraq when the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel happened,
Oh,
and
you're supposed to go to that festival, weren't you? Just kidding.
that festival, yeah. No, there was a festival though.
It was a Muslim
Uh, there
place.
was a festival, but we were on high alert
Hmm.
at that time period. And where we're at, I can't disclose where we were at, but we definitely were on high alert, and there were definitely lots of intel that supported that we were going to get overrun, right? But and there's going to be a lot of kinetic um potential escalation to kinetic violence, uh, 2 ways, right? Um, so yeah, but that never, unfortunately for me, that never happened. So I came back safe, and so did everyone else from my company. But that still does not include the fact that that whole area is still, even I would say, like almost like I guess a little less than 10 years. It's not stable, right? We're in the middle of elections too, and
Right.
terror very.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I missed something or if we just got off topic, but I want to bring it back to disclosure and
Okay, yeah.
what happened, but how did we get from David Grush and all of the possible disclosures to this? I might have.
My key part is that I was trying to make before I made that long tangent.
Right.
Is about government's inability to form a good reaction to disclosure of contact or extraterrestrial life. The government just cannot handle that type of information. Like, and of course, there's and again, I just for on the basis of what I believe that the people are just not ready for extraterrestrial contact with, or the possibility that that is real. That's in fact real, right? Because it's true that the government hide things. It's true that the government doesn't isn't always on the side of the people that it's sworn to serve, and that this whole idea of disclosure is just will be an impossible thing to navigate through. Even on the highest levels of government, people who get paid gross amounts of money to handle this type of stuff and develop a framework for a reaction if this were to pass. And um,
I get that and I understand that to an extent, but also it's clearly already out there. Like spoke in front of Congress. He's probably said much crazier things that he believes are true in the skiffs that he tried to and probably did set up in the weeks and months following. And there's plenty of like very highly accredited people. Dr. Gary Nolan, I believe also from Stanford, is one of the ones, and many, many others Jacques Vallée, everybody who have been slowly and methodically saying what they've seen, that they've been brought to crash sites to investigate, and it has been on black budget projects and like all these things, even back to Bob Lazar. Bob's not even like very highly credited nowadays because of his associations with like the program and with everything that he disclosed from like the program that he was part of. People just basically have written him off to an extent, even though a lot of like, UFO enthusiasts definitely highly regard his opinion and look like at anything that people post that has Bob Lazar involved. But on the topic of like the government being like a daddy knows best, I just think it's dumb. At the end of the day, whether it's real or not, we got to worry about earthquakes and natural disasters and a bunch of shit that in theory, if we could hide from people and hid from them forever and they never really knew about it except for in myth, would be very scary to try to disclose to the public. Like, you live in California, you love California, but when the earth shakes like that, sometimes it's actually an earthquake and you're on a fault line right here. And at any moment, this extra insane earthquake that we've been overdue for in California for like thousands of years now could happen. You could imagine how that could also end badly and have people rioting and freaking out because now their house and their property values and where they want to live. So it could be it could be seen in a number of ways. But at the end of the day, if you're the governing body and you just want to be about truth, the best you could do is give the truth and help mitigate and reassure people that we're doing the best we can. We're all a little scared, but we're pretty sure we have it under control or have, enough of a system set up to respond in our best ways, you know?
Well, to that point, I think that there's a lot of evidence that they are not, right? For example, California are wildfires, right? We know every year that there's probably going to be a big wildfire, right? And the goal is to mitigate destructions of homes, right? Well, guess what? When the wildfire in
Malibu.
Malibu area happened, right? The response to that was bad, right? There's
But
no
there's also
water,
there's
fire hydrants,
also
and stuff like
there's
that because they're
also a
trying
lot
to.
of evidence showing that a lot of those fires were like there was some wildfires, but there was clearly evidence of people intentionally setting more fires near the wildfires to I don't know if those people wanted to like lower property values so they could, get a spot for a better price or whatever. But there's been a lot of evidence and videos of people also getting arrested for setting and adding to the fires. And the whole situation with two people owning all of like the entire basin of water that is responsible for that whole area of like Malibu and like even more of an area. And those two people who have access to all the water refusing to give it to the people, fire hydrants not being empty. The firefighters were reporting they were opening fire hydrants and nothing was coming out. Like that, there's a lot more to that than lack of preparedness.
Well, again, I mean, still, the government should have ways to mitigate these type of incidents, right? Whether the government or the whole thing is a big government conspiracy, right? It sounds like to me if it's a bunch of citizens trying to get lower housing prices or disruption of that, right? There should be a response to that. You know what I mean? We have PACE plans in the army. I mean, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, right? This thing fails, what happens next? Well, we can do this, but it sounds to me the whole thing was just disorganized. And even then, we should have these these measures to try and to mitigate loss of property in life because again we think about it like this, who's really seeing it? The insurance companies, right, and all this other stuff, right? We're not gonna get into
Yes,
what
who
insurance.
cancel the insurance policies for a lot of those areas months before the fire, like just a few months before.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not gonna get into all that, but gonna again going the first contact, right, and disclosure. Again, I just don't think the government just is just incompetent and
Uh,
incapable of handling such information and distributing it to the American public. They just
Right. But even with that, my point is that in the with the wildfires even, it wouldn't help at all for all of the people to not know about wildfires and to try to keep them in the dark. For anything. I think the best case scenario, if there's a monster, if there's a meteor coming, you tell the people, and yes, some might freak out. But hopefully, the rest of us who aren't freaking out can help calm people down and focus our energies into a way that can be productive for the rest of society.
as a really interesting TV show where I was discussing, it's called Chernobyl. Um, you probably it's a very popular TV show, hit TV show on
Actually, I've heard
HBO.
about it, but I actually haven't watched it at all.
Oh yeah, it's great. I recommend you watch it. But again, it's and I'm not and this happens in Russia or the Soviet Union and disaster Chernobyl, but I would say that that incident, if that were to happen in Western society, it'd be the exact same response. And yeah, there's a lot of faulty things that we take safety very on a very high priority in America or the U.S. and most of the Western world, right? Obviously, there's a lot less incidents of nuclear failures in
I'm surprised how good Japan does with all the nuclear failures. How it's been less than 100 years, and Nagasaki, Hiroshima are like thriving cities again. I
yeah.
just I didn't think that would even be possible from the radiation.
Yeah, it is possible. Life still goes. Life finds a way. Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. But there's. But going back to the point of reaction and government reaction to catastrophe, and if first contact was explicitly known to the public, like there's no way around it. There's video evidence. There's people talking to them, interacting with them. You know what I mean? Which, how will the government respond? Because the matter of fact, the government will get involved if it's not just something that if me and you were just hanging out and then all of a sudden some alien just walked up and saying, "Hey, I'm just trying to like see how you guys live as human beings and and how you guys interact because we're just scientists here sent on a mission to because that what we would do, right? If we had
Right.
that power, right? It wouldn't be what I mean, Joe Schmo, like going up there to be a highly trained NASA astronaut, right? To go up there to to try to make contact with
Right.
the other
With a
humans, and
purpose.
it would get data, right? And all the other stuff, right? On the side of civilization, what kind of people are we, right? And the government found out about it. I'm sure we would get a knock on the door, and we'd be like, "Hey, like, who the hell did you just talk to the other day?" We have air traffic signals of this UFO landing near you guys and
Speaking of that
talking about it.
situation, have you heard of Chris Bledsoe?
No.
Yeah, I believe he was in the Air Force, some like military retired guy. He's all over the internet. You can look up his name. He was on the Sean Ryan show for like 4 or 5 hours telling his whole story. He has his own podcast. Him in particular is insane too, because I think he was retired already from the Air Force and he was like, I forget where he lives. He lives somewhere in like the Midwest, somewhere, and he has this like property and he had like a couple guys, I forget what he was doing. He had like a couple guys who I think might have been former, either they just worked for him and they were also former military, but it was like him and five guys that like had helped him build a shed or at his house. And he took the guys out to the lake because he wanted to take them and have like a little like barbecue type situation, and he loved to fish, so he wanted to go to the lake. they go to the lake, he fishes, and they make like a little campfire to try and start like cooking and stuff. And like while the guys are getting the fire ready, Chris is like, well, I'm gonna take a walk around. He like been at this lake all the time. He loved to fish there, so he goes like on a walk, and he like goes and stands on top of a rock and looks up, and he like sees some like weird lights, and he's like, what the fuck? So he like starts like looking around because he hears something, and he walks around, and he keeps like thinking like to his right. He's like he's in a forest, so it's a bunch of trees and bushes and stuff, and he keeps like thinking he hears somebody like 10, 15 feet away. And he says he'll hear something, and then he like stops, and he'll try to like look under and like under the bushes and stuff to see if he could see feet or something. And he doesn't see anything at first, and then he like saw some kind of like weird alien apparently, and it like talked to him with his mind, and like disappeared. I forget if it was this time or one of his other experiences, if it was like the lady. He sees like this weird like lady-ish ghost. It's like a woman in white type situation, which is like a famous ghost people see all the time. And he like he comes back, he ends up back at the camp, and like the guys are all freaking out. They're like, bro, where the fuck have you been? He thinks it's been 20 minutes, like it should have been. And the guys are like, no, Chris, you've been gone for like 4 hours. It's like midnight. Like, we need to go home. Your son's been gone for like an hour trying to find you. His son was also with them. And he's like, "Oh, what? Where's my son?" He has like a thick Southern accent, and they're like, "We don't know. He went to like start from the parking lot and walk through to like while we're going from the other side." And they go and like try to find his son, and apparently I forget if it was like right when he got there they see this, but like his son had like walked through the forest from like the parking lot to try and find him, and I guess he ended up like face to face or something with one of the creatures, and they like looked at him, and like he said he like could feel like and think like they were beaming thoughts into him basically. And like as soon as he like made eye contact, he just like froze, and he like couldn't move, and he was like they looked at him and like shot him with like paralyzing fear basically, probably to protect themselves or whatever. And he's like just like he's like stuck there freaking out, and like he ends up like being able to move again, and they like disappear before, and then he's like he can move again. He's like turns around, and he like ends up running back into like his dad, and the guy's trying to find him.
Mm.
They try to forget about it. They go back to the fire. They're cooking. The like five fucking lights, like ships, come over and like are circling and like doing weird shit, and all the guys see it. They all freak out. They all leave, and none of them like even want to talk about it. And Chris himself has like he's like, I don't know why, but like while it was like talking to me, and like when I was seeing this, she's like I was thinking just like it was beaming like straight like Bible verses and like angelic things into me. He's like, and like I've heard that like, it might be like because they're bad, they want to make you think they're good. He's like, but I didn't feel anything negative. My son had like a pretty shocking experience, but like since then it's been like da da da. A week or two after that, the government shows up to his house. For months and years since then, the reason he's doing these podcasts and stuff is he can summon them. He's had government agents come out with him, and he said that they told him, they're like, we don't know why these things follow you. We don't know why they seem to like you, but they do. And for whatever reason, they don't like us. We can't contact them. So we want to have somebody with you or like close by so we can also get some data on this. And like your story would help in any way. And he's like, all right, like, I guess I don't really have a choice then. And he said, like, he'll basically just like be like praying and like thinking really like, holy shit, and like begging them to come basically. And like the lights will appear. And he's had many experiences with him and his son, like in his yard. He was going to like run through something. He was like, yeah, it was like the winter or something, and he had to have his son come to like the barn and help him. And like they saw the like lady again, and she was like giving him some kind of message and gave him some like spiritual egg or something to hold. And it's a
Mm.
lot of crazy shit like that.
Well, I mean that's an incredible story.
You have to look into it because like people
Yeah.
like a lot of people have said people in the military and who have had these long careers where it wouldn't be very beneficial for them to start talking about even seeing some shit like this, let alone all of that. Like,
But there are also people like, there are people like, for example, there are people. So apparently, this is like a known thing, and there's a base called Fort Campbell. It's in Kentucky. Um, there's apparently a ghost that comes to. So there's what we call a CQ desk, is where you go and check in, right? And apparently a ghost checks in from time to time, and if they and their protocol for that, if that happens, is that they shut down for the day, right?
whole
So
day.
apparently a soldier who hung himself in the barracks room will go in to CQ and talk to them, right? And they don't even know he's a ghost, right?
I think I've heard or read a story about this. Go on though, my bad.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, when that ghost appears, right? And there's usually just new guys, privates, I mean, or people who like, everyone knows about it, right? But they don't know when he walks in that he's a ghost, because he's dressed normally, right? That he goes in and starts chatting up, and he checks in his name, and you don't know until he checks in the name. The name's like, oh shit, it's the ghost. You know what I mean? And they freak out, right? And they're just like, hey, we that guy forgot, I don't know the name, but it's a fame it's a fame it's infamous story in Fort Campbell that they're.
All right, and we're back to the ghost of Fort Campbell.
Yes. So yeah, Fort Campbell, and honestly, like, you hear about these military, it's like, Fort Benning, it's notorious too, or Fort Moore now. Actually, they might have changed back to Fort Benning because they like unwoke
Hmm.
these military names. They named after Confederate generals now.
Oh, right.
But anyways, yeah, we're dealing with sleep deprived and somewhat mentally unstable people. Because you have to be somewhat mentally unstable to want to join the military, especially you're in combat arms. Um, yeah, I mean, you're gonna just start seeing things. I mean, they say that when you're in the woods for a very long piece of time, you start seeing things, right?
Birds, the
Like
trees are moving.
like Bigfoot. I mean, is a pretty good example of Sasquatch, right? Um, and then of course, really, when especially like, are you gonna trust someone who say that Bigfoot is real, or someone who's spent majority of their time in the forest, right? And swears they saw Bigfoot, right? All these crazy Bigfoot stories, and all these crazy stories of like, any type of like monster in the woods, like, around here, it's a devil in New Jersey or something like that. It's a little devil that that's why they named like the New Jersey hockey team like New Jersey Devils, something like that. So yeah, it's a pretty, it's a pretty yeah, people like live in the woods and.
Leprechaun of New Jersey?
Hmm?
Like a leprechaun of New Jersey?
No, apparently it's a good devil.
Hmm.
I don't know what specifically, but apparently the devil lives in New Jersey and he's living in the forest
I thought
somewhere over there.
it went down
Yeah, you should
true.
look it up. Yeah, that's a pretty well known like urban myth, right? But yeah, we talk about urban myths and all the type of stuff, right? They just kind of exceed the whole you just had to be there type deal, or had to be in the atmosphere, because it's not just something you're just gonna just go into and just like, you know, want to like, oh, like, you know what I mean? It's like you kind of just go there and eventually you start believing, right? That's kind of how it is usually.
Right.
So,
But yeah, so
uh,
far for me, the most fantastical story I've heard probably ever that I don't know if I believe it, but clearly this man seems like he definitely believes it, and everybody that was with him, Chris Bledsoe's story I'm talking about, he clearly believes it. Everybody that's with him corroborated. I think one of the guys like won't even like be on camera because he just doesn't even want the attention or to talk about it. But I'm pretty sure all the guys have been on camera again at least one time on
Yeah,
like
I mean that it's hard to like again like lend credibility. I mean, anyone that sounds like talking about the subject matter just sounds like they're schizophrenic or like crazy when they
I
start talking
know,
about
but then when he started bringing up the government, and then Louis Elizondo, he talked about Bledsoe too, and some other guy, some old general, I forget what his name is, but he was also on Sean Ryan, and he's like some OG in like the military who basically like now all he does is investigate like potential anomalous activity and anomalous people and stuff, and he was talking about that like he's like Bledsoe is like a like very rare case where he like communicates with these crafts. He summons them, like he gets them to come to him, and we don't know what it is. He doesn't even really know what it is or what's going on, but he's been working with the government to like make these things appear and like having like a lot of like very credible sources around him to just like study it basically.
I mean, yeah, that's all well and good, but still, don't have real access to documents and videotapes and
Do.
all
Yes,
these
we do. We definitely do. He's posted a bunch of stuff about that.
meeting aliens,
I don't
like
know about
actually getting like a close up shot, at least to the the lights that he sees. You know what I mean? Like there needs to be there are so many things that like when you talk about this stuff, there needs to be
a lot of
like
he
with
has
with
many
with
videos
with
literally
phones.
summoning the lights. And he and clearly there has to be some sort of government report where like or military report on it because he's had a bunch of like military contact and people coming to him about it and making basically asking him to have the event happen because that's the only reason I even heard about it.
I mean, honestly, too, like I feel like with our current administration, with Trump and Vance and Musk at the helm, that if there was information that the aliens are real, they would probably release it or at least
I
tell
don't
us.
know. I thought that if Trump became president, that they would release at least the Diddy files. But they're not touching that. They're not. I'm not even gonna say Epstein because obviously that's never coming out. Donald's on the. He's all. We know he's on the list. So why does he care? Like But I don't know. I feel like a lot of the stuff we thought was going to happen or get at least disclosed isn't really getting disclosed because people were excited even about the JFK shit that got disclosed. And at the end of the day, it's going to be redacted to some extent anyway.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. This is what
really
happens government
5,000.
meddles and these type of things. Government interference. There's again, they're just not ready for the truth. If the CIA was in fact responsible, which there's a lot of evidence that points to the CIA, the JFK assassination, then of course it would just mean the U.S. government, its own government, killed a standing president in office.
Yeah, apparently in the files, it doesn't say that it was like specifically the CIA, but it says it alludes to the fact that it could have very well been the CIA working with the mafia, the New
Yeah,
York or what.
I mean, there might have been a lot of incentives for them to take out JFK, right? But again, we don't have, we have the only thing we have is the report that the Warren Commission pushed out,
No,
which
I'm saying that they just with the recently released files, it was in the recently released 5,000 pages about the JFK assassination. They said that it like definitely wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald like by himself, and that it was like there. I forget. I think it was on Candace Owens' show. She was talking about it, and that it said that it was the mob working with like I forget if it said the CIA or if it was like with government agencies or entities. Because like the fact that, Lyndon B. Johnson came in and just like did the complete opposite of everything JFK was doing seems like all right.
yeah.
Something's fishy.
No, yeah. Well, again, it's just a solidified,
But again,
fact.
even that's disclosed. It's been
Yeah,
like years.
yeah,
I strongly believe they could have calmly released these files alongside like random things, random crazy events, when COVID was happening, but things like that. But way back in the day, I don't know what the fuck, Zika virus or some shit in the 90s, polio was all over the news. Just, slip this in and don't put it on any news headlines. And it's just now something that's been released and added to the report of the JFK files or whatever, People wouldn't have seen it till like the early 2000s and they'd be like, all right, well, yeah, we're pissed. But at the end of the day, most of these people who are in any way involved are already dead. And I don't think that releasing information about, say, like Grush was trying to do about interdimensional beings or non-human entities and crafts being recovered and re-engineered. I don't think it would necessarily make people go into a frenzy or,
yeah. Well, that's just, again, like you're thinking on the mind of Bo Sandu or the Bo I know, right? And
you often forget and you often think that everybody thinks the same. And it's like, yeah, what's going on in my head, of course, is going on. But you're right. I often have to remind myself of this fact that I read that says, I think it was something like 1 out of 10 people don't even, it might have been more than that. It might have been up to like 50%. I'll look it up later, but some amount of people don't even have an inner monologue. Like
Mhm.
when their mouth is closed, they're not thinking in there. There's nothing going. There might be like movies or songs playing, but there is never once them with like their mouth closed, just, did I do that right? Or fucking idiot. Why the fuck did I say that? That was so dumb. There's no inner monologue at all. They're just like beings, like they're basically robots in meat suits.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly how, until something happens, right? Until something like, makes them go fucking nuts, right?
But it
Crazy.
explains a lot of people, right? They don't have
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
So they would freak out and they wouldn't have that inner monologue to be like, wait, let me think about this for a second. What could this, and this mean? Like, does this, that? No. They would just freak out and then be in action. So yes,
Yeah.
you're definitely right that people would probably go crazy. I don't know. I feel like it should be less of an amount of people than the amount of people
It,
who could quell the crazy.
I mean, it's not like in the fact it's like this, that even, let's say, like on a percentile or level, right?
Right.
That only 30% of people reacted badly. Yeah. 70%, it's not bad. 30, you know what I mean? 70% of the American population versus, 30% of the world population versus 30% of the world population. Let's say 20% of the world population, 80-20. That 20% can do a lot of damage. You know what I mean? So it just takes that, because since we're so, oh, well, you know, I'm just gonna go about my life, right? And then these other people, right, can make some huge disruption in our life, and you're just like, what the heck? You know what I mean? Like, these people are crazy, and that's exactly what your reaction would be. These people are crazy. I can't believe they're acting like this. And then you see them on the news, you see them on social media, you see them on your phone. You're like, wow, like that's nuts. Because you can definitely see how even a small minority of people can cause a huge, huge disruption into societal life.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand to an extent hearing some mind shattering shit and going crazy about it. I understand the thought. But in practice, when you're out there going crazy and there's no benefit, there's what's the end goal? There's nothing. I don't understand how they can't, how a large enough percentage of people can't rationalize that I don't know.
Can they rationalize it to do something to quell that 20%? I don't think so. We're so jaded, we're so apathetic toward other conflicts, inner conflicts, because we have so much going on in our lives that we don't care. Like, I have enough problems going on in my life already. Why should I care? right?
Right.
Talk
Do I
about
still gotta wake up and go to work in the morning? All right then.
like Israel Palestine and all that kind of stuff. Like it's just to me like I know that a lot of people out there are very strong, feel strongly about like Palestine and all that kind of stuff, or just top or social media activism, right? But that's all they can really do, right?
Right. And it's
Um,
also that it's just hot right now. When
yeah,
it's hot right now, everybody's putting up flags in their bio and free Palestine. Watch as soon as they get to like some door where somebody's like, nah, if you hate Palestine, or if you don't hate Palestine, you're not allowed in this party, or everybody's gonna fucking shit post you and they all got 100,000 followers. It'll change a lot of people.
I mean to the point where just because you're unpopular on social media doesn't mean people don't like look at Andrew Tate, for example. Look at you know, look at anyone like Elon Musk. There's always people following people who.
Those people are at least solid in their morals and they stand on what they say and mean. I'm saying a lot of these people that are cheering free Palestine and Ukraine and all this bullshit, as soon as it becomes even the most minor inconvenience to their life, they will flip flop.
I mean, yeah, exactly. You know, um, is even then, it's like, how far can all that really go? I'm not trying to dog social media activism. I'm not trying to say that what you're doing is not effective, but it kind of is ineffective. You're not going to stop the Israeli government from doing what they want to do, which is pretty much remove the Arabs from that
The
area.
earth. Really.
Not on the earth, they just want to move them the whole area of Jerusalem from the Gaza, the
I
West
feel like they
Bank.
would be too happy if all the Palestinians just went to like Qatar or Kuwait or wherever they're like currently.
Oh, well, that's what they want them to do. And but
The
even
other
then,
the other thing besides it just being hot right now to fucking like one or the other is that most of these people who are also talking about free Palestine, Israel, Palestine, Gaza situation in general have no idea that they've literally been doing this forever. Then that's why the Jews were originally cast out of Jerusalem, was because they were fighting like this all the time. And
I mean,
then,
it's a contentious area for sure.
right, then
But
eventually all of the Jews from that area had moved other places. And then
yeah,
after World War II, we decided to send them back.
yeah. After it was a pretty much a reaction from the UN after the Holocaust, and it's very strong pro Zionist views that Israel deserves to have a homeland.
I was
That it's their destiny. They talk about it. I went to a bar mitzvah recently, and my little cousin's bar mitzvah, um, and I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the wording of the rabbi was saying was repeat Israel. Israel's mentioned many times. Israel's mentioned as being the promised land. They deserve to be there. They have the right to exist. Right. That was pretty much what was being repeated the entire time at the bar mitzvah. I was like,
that
man,
always has that always been in their books? Because I feel like it's weird that if that's where they were always at, that they would start having to like write books about how they deserve to live and be in this exact spot. Like, do you know? Was that like just added on later?
so I talked to my uncle, and my uncle he lost his wife recently, Merle, and she's my aunt. She died in a car accident, lost suddenly, right? And I've been hanging out with him a lot lately, and um, she was Jewish, and he attended many events, and I knew he was pro Palestine, and I looked, and the entire time I was like looking at him, I was like, you listening to this right now? It's like, and he's an old man. He's like 79 years old, and he's like, I've been through many of these things, and yes, they talk about um Israel and the rights that they deserve Israel to be their land. It's the promised land, right? It goes into their history of suffering right? Goes in the history of, all the conflicts, all the things that, all these terrible things that happened to them, and yet they survived, they persevered, they overcame these challenges, and we need to remember the lives that we lost. You know what I mean? There's a page. I think I have it.
I mean, I feel that, I'm not against any of that. That's great. But my thing is, that's not like what the Torah is about, I don't see like Moses and like the original, Jews that we think about as the original ones in like the Bible and stuff, having like just such a like deathly tie to this one piece of land. Like I get,
Oh, they actually did. Moses split the Red Sea, and freed the Jews to go to Jerusalem. Like
from
that's it.
Egypt, right?
Yeah, he parted the Red Sea because they were enslaved by
Right.
the Egyptians, right? And then he led them across the Red Sea when he split the Red Sea and led them to the Promised Land, which would be Jerusalem, right? Um, Jesus Christ was a Jew. Um, he was in the area we know Judea, right? Bethlehem, Jerusalem. Um, and
Were his followers, like his direct followers, the apostles or whatever, were they technically Christians at that point, or were they also
so
Jews?
like the idea of Christianity, right? And I believe we only have like 10 minutes left. Um, to
Okay.
get to dive in history, they were so the Jews have there's a difference between Jews and Christians. The Jew they both believe in Messiah, right? Christians believe that Jesus was the Messiah, right? But the Jews did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah, right? They're still waiting on that Messiah, right? But Jews are, I guess, evolved Christians that once Jesus Christ died at the cross, got resurrected, and spread his teachings, right, and that he was the Messiah, the Son of God, um, whether he was related to God or messenger of God, is there's whole different sects of Christianity that evolved in Protestants, Catholics, Eastern Orthodox,
9,000
you know,
denominations.
many denominations. Those are just examples to give that what happened post, you know, when Jesus Christ died, right? And his influence, but Jews definitely don't think or don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. They're still waiting for the Messiah. But also, yes, Israel is mentioned many times in the Torah, and that it is promised to them. And they were moved like kicked out of like 190 countries, and endured the Holocaust. Jews have just actually been suffering. If you look at human history, they suffered the most, out of all
Not
races.
unwarranted. I watched the first, I watched this video that said I think it was the first time they got kicked out of Jerusalem. They were like a part of, I forget if they were part of the Roman Empire or if like the Romans had just sent people to Jerusalem. But for some reason, the Jews in Jerusalem had like a bad day or something, and they decided to kill every man, woman, and child that wasn't Jewish. And so it was all the Romans at that time. And word got back to the Roman leader Hadrian at the time. And Hadrian got so pissed, he ended up bringing like 40 legions and killing all the Jews in Jerusalem that wouldn't leave and made them all leave and run, basically.
Yeah, I think that's when they burned their temple and stuff too,
Yeah.
and they got
But
expelled.
something before I forget on the myth of or the story of the reincarnation. I've heard and seen some really cool stuff on that recently that was basically saying there's like I forget if it's in like the Vedas or like Buddhist text, whatever it was, but apparently Jesus met the Buddha before he like was 30 and started like the story of the Bible basically. He like at some point in his youth, he had gone to I forget if it was Tibet or like Nepal, but he met with like these like Buddhist monks and like this guy who like is kind of described as like Siddhartha basically. And he like studied from Siddhartha and learned how to meditate and how to like control his breathing and stuff that like they were doing basically to like achieve enlightenment and peace. He thought that was cool. And then Jesus ends up going back and getting put on the cross, right? And he said that when they like took him off the cross, it was because like his followers were watching and like he had been so tired of holding that fucking position. And like basically what he was doing on the cross, they say he was just like breathing like really slowly and like basically using those like Hindu or Buddhist fucking breathing techniques to like basically slowly heal himself. He said he like dropped because he was tired. He was like he was falling asleep from being up so long and like that. And he said when he fell asleep, they like took him down and they take the nails out of his hands and feet and shit, and they like leave him in the cave where like he was allegedly resurrected from, or like where they buried him at. And apparently he still had enough oxygen or whatever the whole time to where like he's breathing and healing himself and healed his like wounds enough to get up and start trying to like crawl out. He tried to sneak out of the cave, but his followers fucking saw him. And those guys were just like, bruh, he's back, a resurrection. And he was like, no, 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 shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. Then he was like, he didn't have time to explain. He's trying to get out of Dodge from the Romans and the Jews. And before he could say anything, it was them screaming resurrection and
Mm.
story that we're fed now.
Well, that'd be crazy. That'd be crazy because
Well, it makes a lot of sense. It's not crazy at all. If you study Buddhism and all these crazy Buddhist monks, they can now we have 10 minutes. They can like heal themselves and do all sorts of crazy things that to regular people, we would think is just like myth or conspiracy or whatever. And there's a lot of stuff to say that big parts of all major Eastern, Western, whatever governments love to basically give us things to distract ourselves and reasons and mental issues and shit to think about to keep us from just being able to be calm and still and like use and learn the powers of our own minds. And I'm
mm,
not saying that we'll float and shit, but I definitely, if you've ever seen Wim Hof is this like Finnish dude, Swedish or Norwegian or some shit. And Wim Hof has like he's like, he says he can heal like anything with his breath. Like he's like a healing breath guy, and his thing is like breathing work and cold therapy. He does like ice baths, and out there it's so cold he just has like a lake in his backyard that's always like fucking 50 degrees or something. And he's done crazy shit. He's got the longest like underwater swim in like sub-zero temperatures. He swam so long he said his corneas started to like freeze over and he couldn't find the hole to get out. So he was like basically going all around and he ended up like doing like an extra 10 minutes over what he expected he was going to have to do. And he was fine after. Like he's like, I didn't like choke on the water or anything. It was just like felt really uncomfortable. And
mm. I mean, the thing is about like Jesus Christ, right? There's no real.
wait. I'm almost done. And Wim Hof also through like these breathing techniques and shit, they took him to like the university in his country and they started trying to study him. I forget if they did in America or what, but he went to some like famous like medical place and they injected him with random viruses, bro. They gave him like they would give him the flu, they would give him staph, whatever, and then he would just have to sit there basically and like breathe and like that he said all he was really doing was just like very like intense breathing exercises and like whoop, 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 like pumping his own blood basically, and then like calming himself down and like focusing on where he wanted to heal. And he said it was like scientifically he was hooked up to shit and they were watching him heal. They said he has some crazy like 10 times the amount of like white blood cells that normal people have.
That's crazy. No, no, but well, going back to like the Jesus Christ, right? Like, I
Right.
mean,
He
what
could have learned how to breathe like that.
yeah, I mean that's definitely crazy. But not crazy, like it's like so out there, right?
Right. No,
But
there's plenty of monks that do that way before.
yeah. Um, but but what when we talk about like what Jesus Christ preached and all this stuff, it's very similar to the message of Buddha, right?
Mhm.
And what just living a good life, withdrawing your earthly possessions and all that kind of type of stuff, right?
Say that people often say that people always get too hung up with Christianity on like meaning on giving it literal meaning.
Hmm.
People say all the time how literal people try to take the Bible and how it should be interpreted more, vague for its meaning rather than for its like directly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely because that definitely goes into like the what the Bible is written, and people take the word the Bible for its literal meaning of things, and the Bible, which I've had my moments of Christian of embracing Christianity, all right. And my friend, oh my gosh, you know what? You should have like one of my friends come up on here. His name is Chad, and he's really big. Well, actually, yeah, that's the next person I should.
I would
That's someone you should bring on, honestly.
make the connection. I'm more than willing, of course.
And especially if you talk about the platform of Jesus Christ and all, he loves talking
Uh,
about. He's a very devout Christian,
Definitely.
and he's a good buddy of mine. Um, but I had my moments of Christianity, and I'm just having a hard time with the interpretate all these different type of interpretations of it. I'm just like, man, like, why are we listening to a book that like it was written so long ago that slavery and stoning and all these like archaic practices are still in it, and we shouldn't have a book. We shouldn't live our lives based on that, and having the promise of eternal life in heaven on the certain fact just because you believe in Jesus Christ, you're a good person. But that's neither here nor there. But going back, yeah, I mean, I guess to wrap up, this whole podcast and this whole interaction. And I thank you for having me on your podcast, and I hope that gets many views and people take what we listen or what we put out there, and listen to it, and have that discourse that I think that America needs, or society needs in general, to live a better, fruitful life, one filled with knowledge, one filled with passion for learning, and to embrace new ideas that conventional ways. Because honestly, I'm thoroughly having a difficult time processing some things because all the things I've learned in school, all the things I've you know held dearly, these values held dearly because of my schooling, because of the way I've been studied through. It's all going out the window, right? Like, like Donald Trump was like, broke every single rule of how to run a political campaign, and he still now he's in the office of presidency. Now he's doing all these
Fine.
crazy things with the executive or of practice of the executive powers, and I was like, can he do that? He just did, though. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
I feel like it's just more public with him, whereas with other presidents, they would still do horrible things and pass executive orders nobody would approve of, but they would do a better job of hiding it.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to have and talk about, and these it's really hot button issues we talk about. We lightly touched on Israel Palestine. We lightly touched on all these other hot button topics that it's not a polite conversation is impossible to have, especially with if you feel so strongly about certain things. But yeah, remaining objective, remaining like open to new ideas and all these different perspectives that yeah, they seem far fetched. They seem quite out there. But is there a possibility that might be true? Then yeah, yes, definitely. There's definitely a possibility that be true, and that's something that we should definitely keep in mind and definitely not rule out. And um, and I'm definitely open to new experiences, to having opinions heard. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants their opinions heard. And we talked the last 2 hours. I feel like for me, it's the last for maybe I've done a lot of talking, right? You in like a good moderator, you just we're back and forth, right? But having my opinion heard and having my background, my upbringing, and all that other stuff being put out there on a platform, um, well, it's a good healing process, right? So I can only imagine what it feels like for a lot of people who want their voices to be heard. So
No, and I thank you definitely for coming by because, like I said, you're my first guest. I don't know, I haven't really known even who to reach out to about it, but I am more than happy with how it turned out. I hope you'll have yourself back on and help me connect with some more people we can get on because I just appreciate even, the contrasting or anything, the other opinion. I just approve. I just look for not approve, but I look for people who have any kind of opinions that aren't really 100% like mine. And also, the only thing I require is that you can actually discuss some things. If sometimes I might say something contradictory, or I might just try to pitch and play devil's advocate to the point opposite of what you're bringing up because I might just want to know how you think about it. I'm not really just doing it to do it, but it's almost always with an intention of, all right, well,